Have you ever walked through your own house and felt like something else was walking with you? You stand in the hallway, light overhead flickers once, but you brush it off. Maybe it's the bulb, maybe it's the wiring, but why does it always happen near midnight? Why do you pause before opening your own bedroom door, as if something on the other side might not be yours anymore? The air is still, but your skin tightens, your steps slow, and no one else seems to notice. The dog that used to bark now just watches the corners. The silence in the kitchen isn't peaceful, it listens back. You burn sage, you open windows, you tell yourself it's just stress, but nothing moves, nothing lifts, until now. There are houses that are clean and still spiritually heavy. There are beds that hold no sin, but still attract shadows. Padre Pio spoke once of a family whose home felt different. He didn't meet them in person, he saw them in prayer. 3 children under one roof, a mother who cried without tears, a father who no longer sang in the morning. He said their house was not cursed but uncovered. The shield had broken, and a ritual was shown to him, something small, sacred, and immediate. It involved holy water, not sprinkled but assigned, marked, as if drawing a spiritual fence that the unseen could not pass. He saw hands trembling as they touched the doors. He saw something shift in the silence after the ritual was done. He never revealed this in public, only in fragments, to those who listened in spirit. And tonight, maybe this whisper has found you, not because you're curious, but because something in your home no longer feels yours, and your soul is already searching for the gate that closes, not with fear, but with blessing. Padre Pio saw the danger coming, and he left instructions for whoever would believe. If something inside you stirred just now, don't ignore it. There are whispers that come not from fear, but from memory, ancient memory, the kind your soul carries even if your mind cannot explain. Padre Pio once said that when heaven wants to protect a house, it begins by awakening one person inside it, not all, just one, and that one becomes the gatekeeper. The moment they believe, the protection begins. But only if they move, only if they respond. This isn't about religion, this isn't about superstition, it's about territory, spiritual territory. And if your soul knows deep down that your house has felt exposed, then this message is already yours. You don't need to understand why you're here. You just need to answer. Whisper it now under your breath or write it somewhere only you will see. Padre Pio, protect my house for 7 days. Not because I fear, but because I belong to the light. You don't need to shout, you don't need to explain, just declare it. The moment your hand writes, something in the invisible begins to align. The shield does not start with water, it starts with your yes. That's why Padre Pio only revealed this ritual to those who first whispered, I am ready. There's something that happens in a house long before the walls crack or the paint peels. It's slower than decay and quieter than a storm. You don't notice it at first. You go about your day, folding laundry, checking emails, heating dinner, but slowly, something shifts. The room that once felt warm begins to feel neutral. Neutral becomes cold. Cold becomes heavy. And the strange thing is, you can't name what's missing. You try. You say it's stress. You say it's fatigue. But the truth is harder. Peace has left the house. Padre Pio warned about this in a letter almost no one ever read. He described a moment during prayer when he saw a family gathered at a table, 3 plates, 4 chairs, 1 untouched. No one spoke. No one looked up. But the silence wasn't grief, it was spiritual erosion, the kind that wears down the soul until nothing sacred feels safe. He wrote, "Some houses lose their voice before they lose their faith." That phrase has never left the few who read it, because there are signs. Small, subtle signs, and once you see them, you cannot unsee. You come home and feel more tired than when you left work. You light a candle and the flame tilts toward the hallway. You wake up at 3:12 a.m. again and again and tell yourself it's just your bladder. But there's something ancient that knows better. The spiritual realm does not knock, it seeps. And once it's inside, it does not scream, it whispers in doubt. And that doubt feeds on the smallest things. A miscommunication with your spouse, A strange cold spot near the bathroom, a drop in income that has no explanation. You think, maybe we need a vacation, but it's not your schedule that's tired, it's your altar. Padre Pio spoke of this phenomenon during one of his long nights of intercession. Those close to him wrote that he would weep, not for his own pain, but for homes he saw in prayer, homes with open doors and sleeping hearts. He once described a vision where a woman rearranged her living room over and over, trying to make it feel peaceful, but the shadows didn't move. Because the furniture was not the problem. The atmosphere had been breached, and not by coincidence. Something had entered, quietly. In moments of fear, in arguments, in forgotten prayer, he said, "The enemy is not loud, he is patient, he sits, he waits, and soon, he is invited without ever being named." Maybe you felt it, the slow thinning of your home spirit. The day your children stopped hugging you without being asked. The evening when the laughter disappeared from your kitchen. The phone calls that drain you instead of filling you. And deep down, a question grows. What changed? Why does the house feel heavier even after you clean it? Why do you sit in silence, only to feel more noise in your own chest? There was a time when you walked into your bedroom and felt rest just by entering. Now your bed is made, the sheets are clean, but your dreams are restless. Padre Pio taught that the most dangerous attack is not the loud one, it's the slow dimming, the gradual loss of sacred resonance. A house like a body has a pulse, and when the rhythm breaks, the spirit notices before the flesh does. That's why this ritual is not superstition, it's restoration. But before the restoration comes recognition. Before you protect your home, you must admit that something is pressing in, something unseen, but not inactive. And you must look at your life, not the big moments, but the tiny fractures. The moments when your voice shook for no reason, when you forgot the words to your own favorite song, when you stood at your front door and suddenly felt watched. These are not accidents, these are invitations, not from heaven, but from a darker persistence. And it is not just about you, it's about your children, your spouse, your sleep, your mornings. Padre Pio once said, "When the spirit of the house is wounded, even the walls cry silently." He wasn't being poetic, he meant it. Some houses are wounded, not haunted, not cursed, just left open too long, left unguarded. And now, this is your moment to notice, to respond. You may think nothing has happened, but that's the trick of erosion. It never arrives with thunder. It arrives with sighs, with forgetfulness, with tension in the places that used to hold peace. This is why you're hearing this now, because something in your house has shifted. Something in your soul has felt it, and Padre Pio has seen it before. He interceded for families just like yours, not rich, not powerful, just tired. He once wrote that a house without spiritual protection becomes a shelter with no gate, and the wind chooses when to speak. That's what this ritual is about, not about fear, but about reclaiming what was slowly taken, not stolen, just unguarded. Before we move into the sacred act, let your soul do the first work. Awareness. Look around your space. Breathe. Ask yourself what hasn't felt right for weeks, for months. You don't need to have proof. You just need to have peace. And if you don't, that's your proof. Padre Pio never shared this ritual with everyone, only with those who had already begun to feel the thinning, the shift, the quiet unease, because only they would treat the water as more than water. Only they would move through their home like a priest moves through a sanctuary. And only they would understand that this is not a superstition, it is a boundary, a sacred act, a reclaiming. And now we begin. She was a mother of two, lived in a quiet town, worked long hours, barely had time to pray, but her soul had never truly let go of God. She didn't know why the nights had changed. Her youngest began waking up at odd hours, crying not from dreams, but from something else, something she couldn't describe. Her husband stopped speaking at the dinner table. Their home, once loud with small chaos and joy, had become silent. Not peaceful, just silent. And the silence pressed against the walls like fog, invisible but undeniable. She started to notice things, a coldness in the hallway near the bathroom, the sudden flickering of a lamp that wasn't old, the family dog refusing to enter the children's room. She tried to dismiss it, blamed the stress, the exhaustion, the news, but deep down, she knew. One night, unable to sleep, she reached for a book that wasn't hers. It was her grandmother's, a devotional left behind years ago. Tucked inside was a page, a prayer, and a handwritten note with a name, Padre Pio. She didn't know much about him, only that her grandmother whispered his name when she felt something wasn't right. She looked him up. That same night, she found a story, a vision Padre Pio once shared with a nun. A vision of houses unguarded, of families unaware, of spirits that didn't knock, but waited for moments of despair to slip through. And then, the ritual. He never called it that. He simply said, "Mark your doors as you mark your soul, slowly, consciously, with water that remembers the cross." That sentence stopped her. It wasn't poetic. It was specific. She walked to her sink. No holy water in the house, just a small bowl and a pinch of salt she remembered from an old blessing. She whispered the prayer from the book. Her fingers trembled. She dipped them into the water, touched the wood of the front door, and quietly said, "This house belongs to light." The next morning, her son didn't wake up screaming. Her husband asked her if she had changed something in the house. It felt lighter, he said, but couldn't explain why. She didn't mention the bowl. She didn't talk about Padre Pio. She just kept going, one door at a time. One night she stood in the middle of the living room, eyes closed, and said, "7 days of protection, 7 days of presence, 7 days to remind darkness it is not welcome here." 3 days later, her eldest son, who hadn't spoken about faith in years, asked to pray before bed, a small thing. But she wept after tucking him in, because she understood. The ritual wasn't about water, it was about awakening. Padre Pio had seen her in prayer long before she knew how to pray for this. He had whispered the answer. She had just needed to listen and act. That's how the shift began, not in miracles, in response. You don't need a church bell to begin this ritual. You don't need a priest to stand beside you. What you need is stillness, and a kind of honesty that most people never bring into their own homes. Padre Pio never imagined this ritual as performance. He saw it as alignment, a remembering. He once said in a whisper heard only during a late-night prayer that holy water is not a symbol, it's an assignment. When placed with faith, it draws a line between what enters and what must remain outside. This is not about cleansing what is dirty. It is about reminding the invisible that this space is claimed, that these walls carry witness, that your threshold is not neutral ground. Begin with a small bowl. If you have blessed water, use it. If not, pray over water as if heaven listens to every word you breathe. Add a pinch of salt, not for flavor, but because salt remembers, it preserves, it declares that what is sacred will not rot. Place the bowl in the center of your home. Do not rush. Let your body understand what your spirit already knows. This is not decoration. This is armor. Then, walk slowly. Your right hand will carry the water. Your left hand will carry intention. When you reach your first door, any door, pause. Do not knock. This is your house, but speak aloud, even if no one hears, especially because no one hears. Say these words or something like them. This room belongs to peace. This room is sealed with light. Then, dip your fingers into the water and mark the top center of the doorframe with a slow, deliberate cross. Not fast, not casual, like you're signing the memory of God into the wood. Do this with each room, each corner, even closets, even the back door you rarely use, especially the places that feel forgotten. Padre Pio once spoke of shadows that rest in corners not because they are strong, but because they are unchallenged. When you find yourself hesitating at a particular doorway, do not retreat. That is the very place where the ritual must be strongest. Speak louder if your voice shakes. This isn't about perfection, it's about presence. After you've marked the interior, walk to your main entrance, the door that welcomes and releases. Stand there for a moment, not to check your work, but to witness. Say aloud, every step through this door must bow to the presence of God. Then let one drop of water fall, not splashed, but released onto the threshold. That drop is not decoration, it is declaration. You are telling the unseen, here you are known, here you are seen. Here your access ends. Afterward, return to your bowl. Place it somewhere central. Let it rest there for the 7 days. Refill it as needed. If someone asks, you don't have to explain. But if they ask with their soul, don't stay silent. There are those who need this more than they admit. Padre Pio believed that when a house is sealed, the air shifts, not because of superstition, but because of realignment. A house out of alignment lets things in, unspoken arguments, inherited fears, unresolved grief. But a house realigned doesn't repel the dark. It reclaims the light, and the light knows how to stay. Each night during the 7 days before you sleep, touch your fingertips to the bowl. Even if you don't speak, even if the day was too heavy for words, let your fingers carry the weight of intention. Let them remind your spirit that nothing sacred is passive. On the 3rd day, open a window. Let air move through the space, like breath after a long silence. Say aloud, even if it feels strange, no one may linger here unless sent by peace. Padre Pio taught that open windows invite confirmation, that when the wind enters a sealed house, it doesn't scatter, it harmonizes. You may notice small things, a bird landing near the window, a sudden shift in the scent of a room, the bowl reflecting light that wasn't there a moment before. These are not tricks, these are echoes, your soul recognizing its own declaration. On the 5th night, sit in the room that once felt heaviest. Don't fix anything, don't arrange furniture, just sit and say, I am still here. This house is still his, and I am not afraid. Fear will knock, but faith does not hide. Padre Pio believed that fear is not always noise. Sometimes it is fatigue, sometimes it is withdrawal, sometimes it is the long pause before a prayer that never comes. But this ritual replaces pause with proclamation. If you forget a door, go back. If you spill the water, begin again. Grace is not fragile, it flows. And what you declare with holy water is not a performance, it is a placement, like a soldier placing a banner, like a mother folding the same blanket every night. It is a gesture that repeats what heaven already whispered, this house is mine. On the final night, stand at your bedroom door. Mark it again, even if you did before. Say this slowly, even in my sleep, I am covered. Even in dreams, I am not alone. Then rest. Padre Pio once wrote that the last step in any spiritual act is not to speak more, it is to sleep in trust. Trust is the closing of the door without checking the lock. Trust is what invites angels to stand guard, even when your eyes are closed. This is how the ritual ends, not with fire, not with spectacle, with quiet, with water drying on your fingers. With the soul knowing something unseen now stands between your family and the threshold. And tomorrow, when you wake, something will have shifted. Not outside, but within. And that shift will echo, day by day, door by door, presence by presence, until your home no longer feels exposed but held, until it breathes like it once did, like it was always meant to, like Padre Pio knew it could. There is something sacred about what comes after the ritual, after the final mark of water, after the door has been sealed and the bowl has been placed at the center of your home. This is where most people stop. But this is where the real power begins. Padre Pio spoke clearly of this in a private conversation with a young priest. He said, God responds to movement, but he abides in rhythm. The ritual moves something, but it is the rhythm that keeps the shield alive. Because a house can be blessed once, or it can become a place where blessing lives daily. The difference is not in the miracle. The difference is in the repetition, the life that continues long after the water dries. This is where you turn a moment of protection into a lifestyle of presence. You begin again, not with salt or bowls, but with your own habits. Small ones, hidden ones, but deeply sacred. When you rise in the morning, before the lights, before the phone, take your hand and place it gently against the wall nearest to your bed. Whisper nothing more than this: I am awake, and I welcome the light. That's all. Not loud, not long, but real. The air will hear you, and so will the spiritual realm. Padre Pio believed that angels are drawn not to perfection, but to consistency. He once said that even a tired, broken prayer, if given daily, builds a wall no darkness can climb. That's how you continue the ritual. You build your walls one whisper at a time. One repetition at a time. When you walk into the kitchen, place your hand on the cupboard or the fridge. Not to bless the food, but to remind the air that this house receives only what heaven allows. Say it out loud. Even if you feel silly, only provision, never fear. Say it like a mother talking to the wind. Say it like a father naming the truth out loud so the children don't have to ask. When you leave your house, place your palm against the door, not to lock it but to cover it. Say, everything inside is sealed by presence. This is the life of someone who has been marked by the ritual of Padre Pio. Not someone who waits for attack, but someone who lives in quiet defense. Someone who remembers, and because they remember, they continue. Once a week, light a candle in the room that once felt the darkest. Not because it's still dark, but because that place now holds memory, sacred memory. Let the light dance, and as it flickers say, you no longer live here, shadow. This room belongs to God. That declaration doesn't need to be dramatic. It only needs to be true. You may feel nothing in that moment, but heaven feels everything. And the walls hear more than you think. Padre Pio once described the soul of a home as a well. He said, every word dropped into it leaves a sound that echoes for years. So choose your words, choose your presence, choose your postures. Every week, walk the same path you did during the ritual. You don't need the water anymore, but you still need the walk, the repetition, the reverence. Touch the doors, whisper again, not to redo, but to reinforce, to say again and again, this space is covered. These are not acts of fear, they are acts of memory, and memory sustains what the miracle began. You can also write. Keep a small notebook, nothing fancy. Call it what you like. A book of blessings, a record of return. Every night write down one line. Not a paragraph, just one line. What you noticed, what shifted, what stayed. Maybe the hallway feels warmer. Maybe your daughter laughed louder than usual. Maybe you woke up without the heaviness in your chest. Write it, not to track success, but to acknowledge presence. Padre Pio used to say, gratitude builds an altar, one quiet stone at a time. And your notebook becomes just that, an altar made of ink and memory. Place it near your bed. Touch it before you sleep. Whisper, I saw you today. And you will begin to see more, not because God wasn't moving before, but because now you are looking. There is also power in routine. Choose one small act that becomes your seal each morning. Maybe it's a song, maybe it's a breath, maybe it's simply opening the window and saying, let only what is clean enter. That phrase repeated daily becomes more than habit. It becomes a boundary. Padre Pio once counseled a man who felt tormented not by demons but by confusion. He told him, your house is clean, but your rhythm is not. That is where the enemy walks in. Rhythm is not the enemy of mystery. It is the frame that holds the divine in place. This is not legalism. This is legacy. Because what you do now will echo into your children's bones. They will not remember every phrase, but they will feel the shield. They will grow up in a space where the invisible is not feared. It is named and it is guided. That's the gift this ritual gives. Not just 7 days of protection, but a doorway into a lifestyle that the enemy cannot predict. Because consistency confuses darkness. When light returns every morning, it doesn't need to scream, it just needs to show up. And now you are the one who shows up daily, quietly, prophetically. And this rhythm becomes your response to what you saw, to what you felt, to what Padre Pio showed you before you even knew how to ask. This is the life of a sealed house, not perfect, but consistent, not flashy, but firm, not loud, but immovable. Because when you live like this, when your walls remember, when your feet walk the same sacred path, when your words become bricks in the spirit, then no wind, no whisper, no darkness passing by can say it was not warned. You were placed here to keep this house, and now you do, not once, but daily, as one who remembers, as one who was chosen to stand. There's a kind of gratitude that doesn't wait. It doesn't wait for the breakthrough, for the clear skies, for the absence of noise. It doesn't wait for the miracle to take form. It begins now, in the middle, in the silence, in the space where you are still unsure if anything has shifted at all. This is the gratitude Padre Pio spoke of in one of his most intimate reflections. He once said, "The soul that thanks God before the storm has passed is the one that carries light even in darkness. That kind of light is not loud. It does not shout down the shadows. It simply exists, quiet, persistent, holy." And this is where you enter now. You've walked the house. You've touched the doors. You've whispered the truth until the walls began to remember it. But now you must thank, not for the future, but for what has already begun to move beneath the surface. Gratitude is what seals the ritual, not as an ending, but as a kind of divine ribbon, tying together what your hands have touched, what your spirit has declared, and what heaven has already answered. Begin today. Start a small list, not of blessings you can count, but of things that didn't destroy you. Right? I woke up. I opened my eyes and felt no fear. The room was quiet and didn't feel empty. My child smiled before breakfast. The hallway felt warmer than yesterday. My sleep was not interrupted. I dreamed, and I remember light. These are not coincidences. These are confirmations. You were not promised fireworks. You were promised presence. Padre Pio once told a woman in confession that when the Holy touches your house, it rarely comes with trumpets. He said, "The Spirit walks in socks, gentle, bare, but it shifts everything once it enters. And when it does, your duty is to notice, to say thank you, to look at the small and call it sacred. And the more you do, the more the atmosphere responds. This is not magic, it is honor. Gratitude is the language of those who walk with God, and you have been invited into that language, so speak it, not for show, but for rhythm. When you walk past the room that once frightened you, stop and whisper, "Thank you that peace chose to stay." When you set the table, whisper, "Thank you that silence no longer feels hostile." When you tuck your child into bed, place your hand on their forehead and say, "Thank you that they sleep under a shield." These are your offerings, not burnt, not loud, but real. And heaven takes them seriously. Padre Pio believed in the power of repetition, not as ritual for ritual's sake, but as memory training. He said, "The soul forgets, but the hand remembers, so give the hand something holy to repeat. Every morning, lift your hand, even just 1 inch off the bedsheet, and say, 'I thank you for what I do not yet see, because something is seeing you.' The invisible watches the grateful. It doesn't know what to do with a spirit that praises before the answer. It cannot replicate it. It cannot distort it. It cannot imitate it. That kind of thanksgiving confuses every voice of opposition, because you no longer praise to get something. You praise because you already know who entered the house. You may feel resistance. There will be mornings where the air feels heavy again. That's normal. Even Jesus woke to storms. But what did he do? He stood and spoke peace into the wind. Gratitude is how you do the same. You speak peace into the moments that try to steal what was planted. You remind the atmosphere that the ritual wasn't a moment, it was a line in the sand. You live like the protection is already established. Because it is. You don't have to see angels at the door to believe they are there. You don't have to hear chains break to know that what tried to remain has now left. Padre Pio once said that a house sealed by faith is louder in the spirit than any exorcism. He believed that consistent gratitude sounds like a drumbeat to heaven, steady, 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 until every watcher, every presence, every invisible thing knows where it is no longer welcome. Your notebook of blessings becomes a weapon, not because it curses darkness, but because it records light. Each line is a mark on the wall, a reminder to yourself that God is not a visitor in this home. He is resident. He is present. He is keeper. And your job is not to earn that presence, only to recognize it. The greatest form of gratitude is awareness. And now you are aware. When you go to the grocery store and return without fear of what you'll find, whisper, thank you. When you open the mailbox and see bills but feel no panic, whisper, thank you. When your spouse looks at you and smiles without heaviness behind their eyes, say it again. Thank you. You are not being sentimental. You are being strategic. The enemy cannot grow roots where gratitude is being planted daily, because gratitude starves fear. It suffocates dread. It silences the voice that says nothing has changed. Something has changed. You changed. And because you changed, the house began to breathe again. Padre Pio once said, "There is no difference between a house and a sanctuary, except that one is aware of who lives there." Let this house be aware. Let your steps, your glances, your pauses all declare the same word, thank you, not just with lips, but with posture, with presence, with softness in the way you speak, with kindness in the way you correct, with silence in the moments where chaos once filled the room. Your gratitude reshapes the atmosphere. It teaches your children, it re-educates your emotions, and it reminds heaven that someone noticed. And when heaven is noticed, it lingers, not for a moment, but for generations. You may not see all the fruit today, but write anyway, bless anyway, whisper anyway, because one day you will open that notebook, pages full, and weep, not because the miracle was loud, but because the shift was real. And because in all the little things, God was never absent. He simply waited for you to see, and now you do. If you've come this far, and your heart is still listening, then you already know this was never just about a ritual. This was about a return, a reconnection between what you feel and what you choose, between what your house has endured and what your soul now declares. Padre Pio once whispered during a moment of prayer, God does not wait for perfection to send protection. He waits for permission. And that permission, silent, sacred, has already been given by you, not by screaming, not by dramatic signs, but by moving, by touching doorframes, by whispering prayers no one else heard. And now you're standing at the threshold of something else, not just a week of peace, but a lifetime of awareness. If something inside you is saying quietly, I'm ready, then don't just sit with that feeling. Respond, whisper back, not to me, not to the air, but to the presence that has walked with you room to room. Whisper to him, I walk this house with light. Write it if you need to. Say it if your soul won't let go. Let it be your mark, your moment, your vow, not to be perfect, but to be present. This is the moment Padre Pio saw when he first described the house of peace. Not a cathedral, not a shrine, but a heart, awakened, a door, sealed, a soul, deciding not to live under fear, but under covering. And now, if you are truly ready, write it down. I walk this house with light. You may not hear trumpets when the 7 days end. You may not see a glowing sign above your door or a gust of wind sweeping through your living room. But make no mistake, something has been sealed. Padre Pio once described in a vision shared with a fellow friar, what happens when a house accepts divine order. He said, it is like watching dust leave a room that was never opened. Quiet, final, and undeniable. That's what this moment is. Final, and yet it's only the beginning. You have touched every threshold with intention. You have whispered declarations not for show, but as sacred bricks in an invisible wall. And now, the space you live in, this house, this apartment, this small corner of the earth, carries a different vibration. You are no longer a guest in your own home. You are the gatekeeper. You are the watchman, and what you've done has left a mark that darkness cannot ignore. Padre Pio taught that after a true act of spiritual sealing, the spirit realm responds, not always with noise, but with echoes. A stranger will say something that sounds like a confirmation. A scent may fill a room unexpectedly. You'll notice that certain arguments no longer escalate, that dreams shift, that the silence in your hallway no longer feels ominous but clear. Light doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes it just stays. So when you open your front door tomorrow morning, don't expect a show. Expect stillness. Because that stillness means someone else stood watch while you slept. Someone else walked the perimeter while your soul rested. You may never know what was kept from your home this week. What didn't cross the line. What passed by because it saw the seal and turned away. But the spiritual world knows, it always knows. Padre Pio once said, "The enemy fears memory more than miracles, because miracles fade. But memory becomes armor." You've built memory here, not just of water and walls, but of reverence and rhythm. And now, as you move forward, let the ordinary become sacred. Let the act of turning the doorknob feel like stepping into holy ground. Let your hallway be a sanctuary. Let your kitchen carry warmth deeper than heat. When you pray, pray not as a request, but as a reminder. This house belongs to the light. Not just today, always. You may not hear the heavens crack open, but pay attention, because something in you is quieter now. And that quiet is not emptiness, it is peace. It is the final seal. And when others enter your home and pause without knowing why, let them, because their spirit will feel what your mouth may never need to explain. Something was done here, something was released, something was marked, and now the house remembers, and so do you. Don't keep this to yourself. What was placed in your hands during these 7 days was not meant to be buried inside your own walls. There is someone, maybe close, maybe far, who has been waiting for this same ritual without even knowing it. Padre Pio once said, "When light is hidden, it suffocates, but when it is shared, it multiplies without burning out." You don't need to preach. You don't need to explain every detail, but you know who it is. A friend who can't sleep through the night, a sister whose house always feels tense, a neighbor who smiles but looks hollow in the eyes. They don't need another piece of advice. They need covering. They need someone who believes that the sacred can still be passed from one soul to another, and now that someone is you. So don't hold the water back. Don't withhold the whispers. Don't pretend this was only for your comfort. This was an impartation, a beginning, a handoff. Someone else needs the same shield. And now you carry the instructions, the memory, the authority. Light isn't loud, but it is undeniable when it enters. And if you've made it to this moment, then you have become part of that light. Let this not end with your home. Let it begin there. Give what you were given. Speak what was whispered. And protect what was sacred, because someone's house is waiting, and you already know who.